Welcome back, webheads, to another episode of the Mediocre Spider-Mat, my monthly or bi-monthly or sometimes semi-bi-monthly comic book magazine where I snap pictures of Spidey's video game history. And today we're gonna swing through one of its often forgotten chapters. You know, that time where Activision thought it was a great idea to release 3 Spider-Man games in a 15-month period? Well, I've already covered Spider-Man 3 and Web of Shadows, so by the unbiased purity of the process of elimination, we come to Spider-Man Friend or Foe. The movie game that's not a movie game, but says right at the start that it's a movie game. For those not familiar, this is essentially a 3D co-op brawling title with a cavalcade of, hold on to your hats, friends and foes that not many people talk about nowadays. Let's find out why! Friend or Foe is developed by Next Level Games, whom you might remember as the fine folks that brought us Punch-Out!, Luigi's Mansion 2 and 3, and of course, Captain America Super Soldier. They were responsible for the game's main design and the console versions, while A2M Behavior handled the handhelds, with future and temporary stewards of the franchise, Beanox, taking over the PC duties. While they are all aggressively similar, there's still a few wacky differences between them, which I'll be getting to later. The story setup, don't worry, it's incredibly brief, is as follows. A meteor crashes to Earth, splitting into individual shards, which spawns a legion of dishwater holographic robots, which somehow enslave a bunch of Peter Man's rogues gallery. David Hasselhoff then kidnaps our hero and forces him into an unpaid internship at S.H.I.E.L.D., teleporting him across the globe where he punches said robots over and over and over and over again until he needs to punch out the villainous villain behind it all, who shall of course remain nameless, because I don't want to spoil it. And that's pretty much it. Friend or Foe is more concerned with brawling and collecting playable characters, and less about presenting an enthralling comic book plot. In fact, the game's few cutscenes boil down to one of 2 styles: brief in-game encounters whenever a new hero/villain joins your crew, and then very not-so-brief computer-based debriefings with Fury that amount to watching character models T-pose and just spin around. They are also weirdly obsessed with jokes based around Fury's computer system.
Briefing software active. Sense of humor offline.
Excuse me?
Computer was getting a little uppity, so I pulled a couple of chips.
It's here where the guts of the narrative play out, and it's, well, about as nuanced and as deep as a typical episode of Spidey and his amazing friends.
Hey Miles, what are you up to today? There's no trouble in the neighborhood, so I'm gonna practice my drums.
There's a distinct lack of twists, turns, or revelations of any particular interest, save for some nonsense sequel bait, so if you're looking for a decent bit of Spider storytelling, Friend or Foe isn't selling it. Now this is, it's fine, as the aim here was to clearly provide a simple, straightforward tale for the younger set, but it's sort of at odds with the inspirations it takes from the Sam Raimi trilogy. For reasons I can't really fathom, Activision producers thought, well, we still have the license for these films, why not slap that stuff in here too? Which really makes for a weird-ass mix. We have something of a scientist myself, Goblin, new Goblin, Eric Foreman Venom, and finally, the Science Squid. I'm just speaking for myself here, but I don't like this very much. There's no explanation as to why half these villains who are dead in the movies are just not dead. I mean, what purpose does it serve to use the movie designs exactly? Activision had already taken breaks with other licensed versions of Spidey while the movie trilogy was still going on, so what's the deal? When designs and inspirations are not consistent, all it really does is anger up my radioactive spider blood. Truth be told though, as much guff as I'm giving it, unfortunately the story isn't Friend or Foe's biggest problem. Let's get all the not-so-great things out of the way, because spicy headlines sell way more copies of the Bugle, or so I'm told. The thing with most beat-em-ups is that they don't typically last very long, kinda like me! Ba-dum-ching. Averaging out at around 40 minutes depending on the game. Now, I guess someone at Next Level or Activision thought, you know what we should do? Let's stretch that 40 minutes into like 5 hours with absolutely nothing to break up the monotony. No bonus stages, web-swinging sections, puzzles, dialogue choices, or nooks and crannies worth exploring. Friend or Foe is designed to be a combat-heavy game first and only. The problem with that being the combat starts to get old by around the second level, as the limited upgrade tree doesn't really offer anything game-changing. I mean, sure, there's a bunch of web powers and grappling maneuvers, with Spidey and his friends or foes being able to juggle enemies in the air, but it's still pretty fluffy overall. Not bad, just, what's the word that the kids use again? Middle! Yes, it's very middle. Almost as if they knew this, Next Level threw in some equally fluffy buffs that come in the form of pickups, which include invincibility, double damage, and probably the mechanic with the most squandered potential in the game, the Hero Strike. While these have dozens of unique and pretty fun animations spread across all the playable character combinations, they all result in the same thing: a bunch of small blue explosions which function as a screen clear and nothing else. You could have had like moves that heal, do big damage to single enemies, etc. Hell, I think Maximum Carnage had that. And that's basically all you can do in Friend or Foe. Slowly move from room to room, fighting waves and waves of holographic robots, or phantoms, an acronym that I'm not even gonna bother explaining. Now, if I am going to be 100% honest, there is actually one other thing you can do in each level, which is finding and unlocking keystone rooms, which are big rooms where you fight enemies. So, if you'd like to take a break from the constant never-ending sounds of fists on robot flesh, you can hear them again in enclosed rooms instead. Now, fortunately, none of what I described so far here is broken or even inherently bad. It's just not very memorable and gets long in the spider fang very quickly, especially when the gameplay is so damned easy, as there's no difficulty settings. One thing though that is kinda bad is that with this being a Spider-Man game and all, you can see his name on the title, you would think that you could, I don't know, swing on a web any size, but no, there's only one web, one speed, and one size. After a single jump, not a double jump, but a single jump, you hold the button and Spidey does a single solitary swing, then just drops to the ground like a stone. You can't chain into more swings or go faster or higher. There's just one swing, and that's it. For 1 second, you're like, oh, this is fun, and then you're like, oh, no, oh, okay, no. So it's honestly faster just to walk. Like, hey kids, tell your parents to buy you the new video game, Walkman, Friend or Foe. Now, I realize this was probably done so that two players can keep up with each other, as there's several characters that simply don't have that type of mobility in their moveset, but still, this is just super lame. Not being able to really web swing or even wall crawl makes this feel not so much like a Spider-Man game and more like just a dank, forgotten issue of Marvel Team Up. Speaking of which, let me conclude with the game's negatives by dumping on the tone and feel a bit more. You only speak to Fury for 90% of the cutscenes, and every interaction you have with any other character almost always boils down to beating them up, where they then say, well, I sure hated being stuck in that mind prison, so let me join you, Spider-Man, the person I hate most in the world. Rinse and repeat. I could put up with the milquetoast gameplay if the narrative was at least interesting and got into the psychology of the wall crawler having to team up with some of his most hated enemies, but it never even touches upon that. So if you then smush all of this together, you have a story that plays out like a very C-tier, run-of-the-mill, forgettable Marvel event, rather than a dynamic, dedicated Spider-Verse story. Alright, there's some good stuff. There's some stuff that I liked. playing in co-op at least makes the moment-to-moment combat a bit more fun, because with all the enemies bouncing up and down, you can essentially exchange juggling duties between you and your partner if you coordinate. Now, this works way better if you have a real-life co-op buddy sitting alongside you, as while the computer is competent, they're an unideal replacement for the real thing. The flip side to all of this, though, is that there's zero online functionality, so if you are among the half dozen of people who might want to boot this up in 2023 to play with a spider friend in another time zone, well, you're shit out of luck. Visually, the game does have a simple but clean, colorful look to it and wouldn't feel out of place in most Marvel animated programming from the late 2000s. Remember the Marvel animes where Wolverine was like this scrawny, bishy dude who... Anyway, so there's really not that much to complain about when it comes to the graphics, and honestly, out of the two Spider-Man games released in 2007, visually, this is the superior one, so take that for what you will. Voice acting is another highlight. We have the Metal Gear quartet of Josh Keaton, Quentin Flynn, Robin Touchdown Miller, and Jennifer Hale. Then there's John DiMaggio as Rhino and the incomparable David Kaye as Electro.
Yes.
As for our red and blue pajamaed hero, well, he's brought to life by James Arnold Taylor, well known for his roles as Leonardo, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Ratchet, and that's it. Yes, that too. James has provided the voice for dozens and dozens of Marvel heroes and villains over his long career, but never actually played the webhead until this game. He does a phenomenal job here though, so I really don't understand why they didn't just keep him on for Web of Shadows, which only came out a few months later, because that would have made for a really big improvement.
First Doc Ock, and now the Green Goblin? I have got to get a new travel agent.
And lastly, I like the inclusion of the black suit, which you get in the final level of the game, and it's just neat. It plays identically to the red suit with absolutely no new moves or abilities other than a damage buff, and is the inferior Raimi design, but yeah, it's neat that it shows up. Friend or Foe came out on absolutely everything, and when I say absolutely everything, I mean there's one actually pretty huge caveat. This has to be one of the most bizarre cases of skipping a console I've ever seen. It swung on to the Xbox 360, the Wii, the PC, the PSP, the DS, and the PS2. Hey, where's the PS triple ballin'? Like, think about this. A game based on a movie trilogy didn't release on the console whose logo font was taken from that movie trilogy. I can't really find a reason for why this is, but it was apparently planned for some point for the PS3. It just never happened. In terms of how the game plays in all these ports, well, it's identical, at least on the consoles and PC, but we gotta talk about those weird discrepancies I foreshadowed earlier. Silver Sable, for starters, inexplicably is an exclusive character you can only play as in the Xbox 360 and PC versions of the game. I guess someone at Microsoft were huge Sable marks? The PSP version, developed by A2M/Behavior, is a good bit different, with tweaked level layouts, menus, and more motion comic style cutscenes. Moreover, the Transylvania level from the consoles was removed and replaced by an unnamed island, but the characters you recruit there are the same, which makes me wonder what even the point of this change was. Even stranger, the PSP, just the PSP, has its own duo of exclusive characters, but also lacks some others. The new ones are Electro and Carnage. Carnage! A PSP exclusive! This makes especially no sense given the sequel bait at the end of the game, but yeah, it is what it is. To make up for this, I guess, Scorpion and the Lizard were both removed. Like why?
This is something else.
Before we wrap this up into a neat little web package, I gotta talk about the DS version, which might actually be the best of the bunch. It's got a vastly different set of levels, and you actually get to do different stuff in them. Crawling on walls, dodging subways, destroying specific objects, and even solving puzzles. Yeah, it is missing the local co-op and doesn't look as nice, but this is honestly way more Spider-Man-y to me. I played this once back in the day, but haven't gone hands-on with it in recent years. For those of you who may be more familiar, do let me know what you thought of it in the comments below. Then there's the unlockables, or unlockable singular, because once you've beaten Spider-Man Friend or Foe, you get, drumroll please, New Goblin. Yeah, I know. Really weird that both 2007 Spidey titles had him as the big reward, as I guess someone at Sony Pictures or whoever were really betting the farm that this younger, extremier, trust fund Skyboarder version of the character was somehow gonna be a big thing. Despite, everything, I think Spider-Man Friend or Foe could have been a great supplemental Spidey experience if certain adjustments had been made to it. Taking what is essentially a 30-minute gameplay loop and stretching that into multiple hours absolutely does it a disservice, as you start to disengage with it very quickly. A possible solution to this would have been to shrink it down to like 2 hours, condensing the amount of stages per world and add a few bonus stages into the mix, crawling on walls, dodging projectiles, or breaking objects which would net bonus XP. Then making it a downloadable title just for the Xbox 360 and PS3 and charging like, $20 for it, instead of the full $60 price tag it carried at launch. Because as it is, Friend or Foe just doesn't have enough ideas or content to make for a compelling full-fledged experience, which is backed up by its critical and commercial performance. It averaged 60s and 50s across every version, didn't crack the top 10 of the North American charts when it was released, which, considering it was available on 6 different platforms, isn't so hot, I can tell you that for free. Fortunately, and obviously, Next Level Games was spared by the Activision curse of immediately having to file for bankruptcy or being shut down within weeks of producing a low-selling title for Mr. Kotick. Even with all these issues and low sales though, I wouldn't have minded to see them make a sequel that really expanded on the concepts that did work while keeping it focused and streamlined, but I guess it's just one of those multiverse branches that we'll never get to see. With all that said, I limply award Spider-Man Friend or Foe 2.8 mysterious villain heads out of 5. And if you out there would like to nominate any other radioactive Spider games or topics for me to spin a web for, let me know in the comments below or swing on over to my Twitter. Until then, Excelsior, true believers, and I'll see you next time on the Mediocre Spider-Mat.